Hi there. In this video, I'm going to try to clear up the mysteries of the rental property area of Quicken home, business, and rental property. It can be a little confusing, admittedly. It's an interesting system. I don't use it in its entirety myself, but I think for the right user, it might be a great fit. You can also use it partially, which I talk a little bit about in the video as well. Hopefully this will help unearth some of the mysteries of the rental property area for you while you are setting it up. Thanks so much. See you in the video. I'm Joe DiSanto, by the way. I'm an independent CFO and business consultant. I actually spent most of my career in Los Angeles building a few multi-million-dollar businesses, and I've since semi-retired, and now I help other businesses and individuals manage their money and plan better for their future. So if you're interested in small business, personal finance, and real estate advice, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks. Hello there, welcome back here to the video on the real estate section of Quicken. I've been asked to make this video actually a few times now. I should say out of the gate, this video really pertains to Quicken home and business. Well, it's actually home, business, and rental property it's called now. Back in the day, for anyone who wants a little Quicken history, there used to be a Quicken home and business and then a separate program called Quicken rental property. They sort of combined it into one. But again, I've talked about this multiple times. This particular version of Quicken only runs on Windows. There is no Quicken home, business, and rental property for the Mac, which is a bummer. Now, that may be confusing you right now because you see that I am on a Mac, and I am. What I do is I run a program called Parallels on my Mac, which basically allows me to run an instance of the Windows operating system on my Mac, just like an app, and then in there I've installed Quicken. And the reason I do that is because I've been using Quicken for a while, even way back when I had a PC, and at that time I was using the home and business, blah, blah, blah. So when I switched to a Mac, I didn't want to like lose all my data and switch to the Quicken version, so I came up with this option. Plus, I used to work in post-production, so having a Windows operating system on my work computer was always incredibly handy, so it was like no big deal for me to do it. So to the rental area. Now in Quicken here, you know, there's lots of menus. I have some videos about those, but over here in this particular menu, there is the rental property area. Now, I'm going to say out of the gate, I don't use the rental property functionality in its entirety for my own rental properties. I use some of it, you know, for organizational purposes, but ultimately my feeling is that it's too complicated for its own good, and ultimately, like, if you do everything right and, you know, use it to like its max, like I don't think it's worth the extra time to sort of like make sure you methodically use it the way it sort of needs to be. It could be great, but it just needs some revision to the way it works, in my opinion. However, I don't have that many rental properties anymore. Like, I used to have 10 total, I think, at one time. But many of them were in other states, so I was using property management. And because I was using property management, I wasn't collecting rent. I would get all my rent combined, sent to my checking account, and then I would get a statement with, like, the detail of what that, you know, income, expense, and all that. And then I would just like enter a transaction with the deposit with a breakdown of the detail as like a split transaction or journal entry. So like it didn't even fit in well for me when I had more units. Now I only have a couple units, and it's definitely not worth the hassle for that. But if you had a lot of units that you were managing yourself, you might find that it is worth the hassle because it keeps a lot of details organized. Okay, so let me try to jump in here. I've been trying to like figure out what's the best way to do this video that's not gonna be confusing, but I guess I'll just kind of start at the beginning. So here you can see here I've set up a few things. I have some test properties set up, okay? And what I have set up here, these test properties, they're all kind of assumed to be a single family home as a rental, but you can do multifamily and so on. To me, I mean, and I've said this before, using something like Quicken, ultimately the good information you're getting out of it comes through reports. But like the software itself is really just like a database of information. You enter data, you know, and the software amalgamates that into a useful, easy to read report. So I'm going to show you the report ultimately that gets created here. Now, and this report, by the way, is under reports, rental property, cash flow, okay? And as you can see, what Quicken has set up here is it's utilizing one set of income and expenses for all your real estate, but it's giving you a breakdown by property right here. And the way that it's giving you this breakdown by property is because this column is set to subtotal by tag, okay? If I got rid of that and I said don't subtotal, it would basically just give me a total sum income and expense for all properties combined. If I do the subtotal by tag, it gives me a breakdown on a per property basis utilizing the tag functionality, but then it also gives a total. Now you might be saying, well, hey, how'd you set up the tag thing? Well, when you set up a property in the rental property area, it automatically generates a tag for the property. However, that said, you could make your own tag for the property manually, but that's kind of part of the way this system works. Now, if I go over here to the category list, I actually have it already up over here. This is making use of essentially an income and expense set of categories for real estate. So I'm going to make a couple more videos about real estate and some alternate ways to set things up, which is why I have kind of a few different types of categories in here. But for now, generally out of the box, Quicken's going to have a real estate income category like this. And it's going to be, the ones in bold, by the way, are like sort of like the highest level. As you can see, once you start going down to subcategory, they're no longer bold. But you can see here, this is labeled income. I've put this subcategory in here called rents for my own organization. You could put the actual income right to this. And then it's also going to have a real estate expenses kind of highest level category, but it's going to include some subcategories in that case as well. And those are the categories that are sort of being represented in this report. Now also here in this report, it automatically has transfers turned on, and it's showing transfers related to the security deposit liability account that Quicken will automatically set up when you set things up in the real estate area, and I'll show you that. Now this report is essentially only making use of activity that's happening in this rental property sort of area. Like if I go to look at the customization of this report, it's got all the accounts selected. It's got all categories selected. What is limiting what's showing up in this report is stuff that is tagged by property. So if I were to put on all these tags, it's really just a cash flow report columned out by tag, but it's automatically limited when you pull it from here. Take these off. When you pull it from here, reports rental property, what it's doing is only reporting what is tagged with those rental properties, okay? The transfers, by the way, like, you know, you have income and expense, of course, stuff that you've categorized to income and expenses that shows up in reports, but you also do transfer money from one account to another. You can turn seeing those transfers on and off, essentially, here under Customize Advanced. if I exclude all transfers, we're going to get rid of that. I would generally have that off in a regular report, but in this report, honestly, maybe you might want to have it on because you can see kind of like, oh, okay, like when did I get security deposits and for how much? So I guess we're kind of going a little bit, starting at the back where the result, and we're going to kind of show you how the result is made. So here you can see we have our rental income and we have rental expense. Now I've put in a few dummy transactions to illustrate all this with this report. So there's not a lot of activity in here, but there's enough. Okay, so let's put this aside for a sec. So here we have our properties listed, okay? And when you make a property, it can have a tenant or not have a tenant because, hey, you say you're like, oh, I want to set up all my properties. Maybe only a few of them have tenants right now, or one's missing a tenant, whatever. So you first make properties to start this process. I'm going to add a test property 5 and show you what happens. Test property 5, okay? I tab through, you can see it automatically makes that tag for the use that we've mentioned. I'm going to put in the address, Providence, Rhode Island, 02904, we'll say. And then you can choose the property type here, single unit or multifamily. Multifamily is where you get to take advantage of a multi-unit thing. What would end up happening is if you had multi-unit, maybe we'll make this multi-unit so we can see. We'll call this Unit 1, Unit 2. I don't think if you fill anything in, is it going to consider it a unit, but you could, I guess, delete the remaining units. You could add more here. Okay. Now, it offers to track the value of the property. I don't do this, that means basically it's going to go check in with Zillow and try to get a value for the property. That sounds cool, but ultimately, a couple issues with that. Zillow is often wrong, number one. It can be particularly wrong for multi-units, number 2. 3, it's going to automatically put this reminder thing that shows up every quarter for you to go update the thing, and unless I haven't figured it out, you can't just cancel the update. You have to go do it in order for the reminder to disappear. So I'm just like, I will update the value of my properties annually, manually. So I'm going to hit no, I will do this later. And then it says, let's see. Yes, I want to track the value of this rental property. Yes, I want to track the value of this rental property. House account name. No, I'm just going to say no. Okay. Now, property documents, we're going to leave this blank, but you can add stuff there later. So I'm going to hit enter, okay? So in this case here, now we have a 5th test property, okay? And it doesn't have any tenants, so it's vacant, okay? And it shows unit 1, unit 2. Okay. So now, what we're going to do here is we're going to add now a tenant to one of these units, okay? So you have a property and then you add a tenant. And along with the tenant, you're going to see that we create a unit rental, monthly rental or income amount. There'll be a place to put tenant, details. There'll be a place to attach your lease and things like that. Now, this is where I use it a little bit. I do actually create properties, and I do create a tenant, and I might attach my lease and things like that, but that's like the end of where I kind of use it, and I'll kind of explain why as we go here. But I'm going to do, so we'll call the unit 1 tenant. You could put the actual name though. We'll say the rent amount here is $1,000 a month, okay? We're going to say this is property 5, unit 1. The rent we're going to say is due, what's today, the 3rd? I'm going to say the rent's due the 5th of the month. Okay, the rent that is collected, it's asking you where do you want it to go, which account once it gets collected. We're going to put real estate checking. That's what I have over here. All right, so there's some info there. You could put contact info. You want to probably come over here to terms and agreement. We'll call this a 1-year lease. The lease start date we'll say was April 1st. Grace period we'll say 10 days. No, we'll say 5 days. Move-in for day April 1st. So look, it automatically puts the lease end date. We'll make a late fee of $35 if you want. You don't have to do that. It's got no move out date as of yet because they just moved in. Now security deposit, we'll say they put $1,000 down. We'll put that as April 1st. And what's going to happen, I'll show you, as you put this in, it's going to throw this amount of money over into your security deposit liability. Now the amount of money should go into our checking account because we get it, but we're tracking the what we owe in security deposits through the security deposit liability account, which automatically gets set up once you do this for the first time. Documents here, you could attach a document, which would be the lease, and then you hit OK. Now we notice here that, let's see what happened. Now to me, see, it put the security deposit here in our deposit liability, okay? But again, this is kind of like, it didn't really do it the right way because, one, okay, what it did was it categorized the security deposit into the same account. And I've talked about this. This is the primary thing that, one of the primary things that makes Quicken not like QuickBooks, in that it's double entry accounting, though I'm sure someone would try to debate that with me, but in my opinion, it's double entry accounting that can be broken. Okay, so meaning that whether it's a debit or credit, it's got to have an equal offsetting transaction somewhere, whether that be another like bank account, a liability account, expense, or income account. However, with Quicken, you can have that other account be the same account it's in, which essentially kind of like makes it disappear into the abyss of accounting, I guess. It would never generally show up in a report except if you had transfers on, like I showed you. But that's helpful for opening balance equity, because if you don't want to have an opening balance equity account on your books in Quicken because you really don't need one. But in this case, it's kind of screws you up because, well, we got the money, right? But it didn't go into the abyss. Where'd it go? It went into our real estate checking account. So I come over here and I will change the category of this to that. And now I've made a transfer. Basically what's happened is I've created the real money flow. The money got deposited into our checking account, but while it's in there, you know, we sort of are tracking it over here on the security deposit liability. So that means the money is kind of in our account, but we know that it has a liability against it. And even that's a little bit, but it's more correct. Okay, so back to the property here. Now, I'm gonna set up another tenant here, and I'm gonna do it a slightly different way, or I'm gonna adjust the details so I can illustrate a point. Okay, so let's add tenant number unit 2. We'll say this rent amount's $1,200, and it's done. Now we're gonna make it $1,300 just so it's different from all the others. The property is 2, account name we want the money to go into when we collect amount real estate checking. We'll say it's due on we're gonna say the 1st for the heck of it. And now we'll just call this a 6-month lease. We'll say this one started March 1st. Now I'm making this example because if you go to use the rental property area and you get a bunch of units, you're going to enter all the information, right? But you're going to enter accurate information. You're going to have probably leases already existing, and maybe they started 6 months ago, maybe they started 2 years ago, blah blah blah. And unfortunately, with the real estate area, it will only give you sort of tracking for rent collected or not collected starting today forward. You can't, even if you put leases started, you know, whatever, 3 months ago or a month ago, it won't show you those rents as being paid or due, which was a problem for one client that I helped out with this. But anyway, I'll show you a little bit more as we do this. We'll say the grace period's 5. Move-in date was March 1st. We'll say a late fee for this. I don't know, it's $40. You can basically what this late fee does, by the way, is if they go overdue, it'll kind of automatically tax it on as also due, which you might want, you might not want. It just depends on how strict you are with your tenants. Security deposit, what did we say, $1,300 this was? Let's just say for, shoots and giggles, we got it on the 1st. You can put in the lease there if you want. Now, also, the default view here for what amounts you have owed at the moment is current month. I'm going to put current year here so you can see a little bit more activity and I can explain some of this stuff. I'm going to put this word tenant here. To tenant. Do on the 1st. Okay. Okay. Now. So. Okay. Now, one thing people want to do with their properties is track whether or not they've been paid or not. So this one person that I helped out, basically, she was setting all this up. She wanted to have it start at January 1st, which makes sense. But you put in the actual lease date, whether it's January 1st or last year sometimes, because you want the expiration dates to be accurate. You want to see when leases are coming due, various things like that. In her case, she had some months of rent unpaid, and she wanted something to basically show her outstanding rents, kind of like a collections report. And we quickly realized this wasn't going to do it in the way that she wanted. It does it in its own way. It might be fine, for whoever's using it. It might be fine for you. It might not be. But I just want to point out that you might have noticed here, we put that this tenant lease started March 1st, right? So you would think until we put in some additional information that it would show a rent due starting March 1st, and then it would show on April 1st. Well, it's April 3rd, okay? And we said the due date was March 1st. So March 1st and April 1st are in the past. It is not going to put any rent due information here for these months because they're in the past from the day we're setting it up, okay? And that really threw her off. It was very confusing, and I agreed it was very confusing. And unless, you really kind of sleuthed around and tested a bunch of things, you couldn't quite figure that out very easily. So that's something I want to point out with this. Now you can see here, it's showing eventual rents due going forward. Now here is a good example of what's going on here. We have some in black, some in gray. Well, what this black means is that this tenant paid for February. It's been turned black. They paid for March. They haven't paid for April yet. Their due date is April 13th, so they don't have any rent that's overdue right now, okay? What I'm going to do here, is this. Let's see if I can make an adjustment here. I'm going to have the rent due be on the 3rd. See, I changed it at the 3rd thinking it might change this, but it didn't. And it's very it's a little sensitive as to when you set it up originally, you would think you would be able to edit a few things and get things to pop on and pop off. I just made this due the 4th and now it's the 3rd. And you would think, okay, this would show up here as due, grayed out due, but it doesn't. Now, if I delete this, I could delete this tenant. By the way, I'm going to stop here and show you that you can go and get your tenant lists and property lists over here. So if you want to like do different things like delete, edit, blah, 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 with your properties, you can go to the list. We can go to the list of the tenants and do things, delete, blah, blah. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to show you what happens if I set it up slightly differently at the beginning. And this is important because when you go to set up your stuff out of the gate, exactly the dates you choose and various things will like affect what displays, and it can make it, you know, more or less confusing. So hopefully me showing you some of these little strange things will help that. Unit 2 tenant. So I'm going to do this all over again, but I'm going to make the due date the 4th of April, okay, one day after today. I'm going to go 6-month lease. We'll say the lease did start though March 1st. Still grace period on 5 days. Moving date. Okay. Oh, I also want you to notice that I didn't really point it out at first, but see, when we added unit 2 tenant, this security deposit went up. Okay. Makes sense, right? When I deleted the tenant, it did not delete the security deposit entry. So we have to remember to do that as well. Now you could choose not to put any security deposit in here and don't even deal with this, but you're going to end up getting a security deposit in the checking. So you might want to do it. You might not. You could probably just make your own setup of this and not have the rental property tenant functionality do it. These are some of the choices you can do. Like, as I said, I use this a little bit to help me stay organized with some stuff, you know, like I like to know who the tenants are, and like, especially even when I had property management, I still want to know who the tenants are, and I wanted copies of their leases. Often because if I went to go do lending or whatever, I would need to have copies of their leases, you know, and know when their leases expired and various things like that. So I organized some of the info in here. But I'm going to put the security deposit in yet again. So, okay. Whatever, not going to attach documents. So now look here, because I set this up with a due date after today, that now showed up. But as you noticed previously when I entered this, when I went to go edit this thinking this would show up, it did not. Now, what I'm going to do here is I have 2 entries here of the security deposit, right? So I'm going to delete one because it is not real anymore. I'm going to change this to be real estate checking so that it shows up in my checking account. Obviously here you can see I did not do that for these other tests. If you're wondering why, it's just because I wasn't something I needed to do at the time. I wasn't doing a demonstration. Technically, I guess I could do it now. So I made that fix. Go back over here. Now, what's essentially going to happen is you're going to look to here to stay on top of your rent, right? So right here, you can see none of my due dates here for April have passed, right? So April right now is all gray, meaning it's telling me all these rents are due, but they're not past due. And your total rent due is $7,600 right now. That's pretty good, right? Now over here, we can see that for March, this is paid because it's black. Okay, we also know February is paid because it's black. Test property 2, I set that up probably after a date or after a certain date, and it had this issue. You can see January has nothing. So I set up all these test properties in February when I was working on this. So none of the properties showed anything for January because of this reason that I set them up after January. And even though probably the lease start dates I used are like 2022, it just can't show any information prior to the day I set it up. So it's kind of annoying, you know, and a little bit misleading in some ways, but if you know that that's the case, then that's the case. And if you notice here, I have a lease date that I set up for this unit on March 1st, but I did it today. So it shows this $0 as black as though nothing was due, but there was something due and it was paid, but it's just not showing that, right? So in the beginning, you're going to have a little bit of this just weirdness. Going forward, over time, it's going to get better and be more accurate. But sorry if I'm jumping around. It's confusing, unfortunately, which is why sometimes, Quicken, there's lots of, as I always say, there's lots of ways to do things in Quicken. You don't have to use every bit of functionality. I certainly don't, but you can use, the stuff you like. And there's always like multiple ways to attack something too. And as I said, I'm gonna do a couple videos about managing and tracking the income and expense of your rentals, not using all this and kind of doing it in a few different ways. Okay, so March here, what we're showing is this was paid, this was paid. Now look, this is still gray. It was due. It's April 3rd. It must not have been paid, right? You notice here we have a little thing, and what this means is it's past due. Now, that brings me to these. Right down here, you would think these things, you could click them, and they would do something. Because most of the time, that would be the case. They don't do anything. All they are is a legend to show you what these little alerts mean. As you can see, this little alert means rent overdue. See, we have some alerts over here. What does that mean? Lease ends in this month over here. So you're going to see some things like this. Now, why don't we see rent due here? Maybe it would show up only on the day it's due. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, we could like edit this here. See if we rent due on the 3rd. Let's see how this changes things. Look at that. Oh yeah, okay. So it shows you that the rent is due only on the day that it's due. Is that helpful? Not exactly. I would rather have it show it for the from the beginning of the month through the due date and then switch to this. But I don't know. I don't know if you recall, prior to putting in these units, we had a vacant unit here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to test property 5. I'm going to add a unit called unit 3, and then we can see how that looks. Look, unit 3, vacant unit. Well, it also says vacant. So some of these things are sort of helpful, but you're like, I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how we enter this. So let's just say, for example, okay, it's April 3rd, they finally paid. All right, so we're going to enter their payment. It's funny that we're here. Now, just heads up, okay? If you want a payment to be reflected in this system here accurately, you absolutely have to come here and enter the payment here. You can't just let the payment download into your bank account and tag it as test tenant 3, and it will basically go apply itself to the last remaining rent due. That's another reason why that I find this system annoying. Like, you might not want to come here every single time. What likely would happen in practical reality is you go update your bank account, right? And you see the payments come through. I mean, oftentimes, either payments are set up, tenants are set up to auto pay, or, I get paid through Zillow, so different ways. You might want to just have it download and then go, okay, when it downloads, have it apply and have it reflect in this whole system here, but it doesn't work that way. You have to come here and enter it here, okay? Now, when you come here and enter it here, it knows that it's the property. It puts in the tenant name, so it's going to tag it correctly here. It puts in this memo, which is meaningless memo. You can delete that. It's putting it to the account we set, okay? It's automatically setting it to go in the date of the date that it's due, but that's not right. It probably should put today's date, I would think. The rent received is $1,500. Now it automatically puts the late fee because it knows it's late, and you might not automatically get this. You might charge us, sometimes you might not. So you can change that, and just put nothing. And then it puts the method, transaction method that is going to pop up here in the checking account. Okay. You can create a receipt, which actually is kind of cool. This would you could set it up so it would email a receipt to the tenant if you want. And then you hit add. Okay. Okay. And now it's showing there is nothing. Look at this. So you think, oh, whoa, the payments show up here. But because I put it that it was paid on this date, okay, it actually put the amount over here. And then it put this late payment. And you're like, I guess maybe that would be helpful. I don't know. I don't love it. It's like, it's got all these little things that it's programmed to do. And unless they match up with your brain, then, you know, you might be like, that's just, I don't know. I don't like the way that works, you know? So can we change that? You know, can we say, let's see, maybe we could go over here to the checking account. Let's just go make this on March 31st. See what happens. See if it changes it. Back over here in the rental property area. It did. Okay. So like if you don't want it to show up in April, you know, you could change the date to March, and it's going to have this little flag on there. Do you need to have that flag on there forever? I mean, you might care. You know, you might want to know, like, hey, this tenant paid late every month for like 6 months. You know, that's something to be concerned about. Or maybe you're like, they're cool. They always pay a little late. I don't sweat it. And you don't want to see that, but you're going to see that basically. Okay. So what do we have here? Now, in this case, you know, I think I might have skipped that. You can skip a month. Let's do that, for example, here. I don't know why you would ever do that, but if I skip this, are you sure you want to skip this? Yeah, we'll say skip, and look, yeah, it put 0. So they're like, you didn't collect any rent for this month, but I'm not going to give you any alerts because you told us that you're cool to not skip rent. Like, I guess that's an okay feature, you know. Maybe because I've never owned like 100 rental units, I haven't run into every possible scenario, you know, that I would want to keep track of. So maybe the rental property area is going to like make a lot more sense for someone with lots of units. I don't know. But anyway, I'm showing you how to set it up. Okay, so let's see, back to April. So, you know, let's do an example here. Well, right now it shows that, you know, we've skipped this month for April, okay? We got unit 3 is vacant, so there's got nothing there. And all these people owe us money, and it says we got $6,000 owed. Now, here's something to show, like this other person was like, all right, this is cool. It shows me right here how much rent is owed to me currently that I don't have. But if you notice over here, all of these are dark, or all of these are black now, so it means that the rent has been received, but the totals up this. So it's like this other person said, I want to only know what's still owed to me. I don't want to know like the total amount if it's a combination of been paid and not been paid, you know. And they were like, can I change this to show it the way I want to show it? Is there some setting? The answer is no. So this whole system, the rental property system, is a little bit kind of closed off in like what you can change. But anyway, let's do an example here. We're going to enter each of the rents. It defaults to the rent to the date due, but I don't think you would want to put it in on the due date if you got paid well in advance, right? So we're not going to do that. We're going to put today's date. I'm going to enter this guy. enter this guy. See, now it defaulted to 4.3. Why, I don't know. Okay. Okay, so now, again, we now have marked everything paid. It's all black, so you know nothing to do, but again, the total is the same. So should this total always be an addition of everything paid and unpaid? Should it be a remainder of what's owed? You know, up for debate. I guess it just depends on how your brain works and what you would want to see. Okay, so now something else I want to show you that doesn't make much sense in that we've entered all this rent, right? But look, it comes into the checking account we tell it to, which is great, but it doesn't categorize to a particular place. It tags, which it needs to do in order for the reporting to work, but it doesn't go into the category. So back to our report here, our income, at least for this setup, we put to real estate income all rents. But as you can see, now we have a bunch of uncategorized rent in here because it did not categorize it for whatever reason. I would think you should be able to set a default rent category and just have it automatically categorize it, but that does not seem to be the case. So this is asking me if I want to make everything this thing for one transaction. Yeah, I'll hit yes, because that'll just auto categorize it. If you're curious about that, I have a video on memorized transactions that will explain what that was if you haven't seen it before. It's actually a handy feature. Okay, so now I've categorized all those things. I come back to the report, and as you can see now, we don't have any uncategorized. It's all up here. Now, transfers here, they've changed from when I started this video. And if you recall, I went over in here and I said, hey, this doesn't make sense that it categorizes into its own category because I did actually get the money, so that has to be reflected somewhere, right? So I said, all right, well, I'm going to categorize the security deposit to the account where I got the money. And now my transfers say I had a transfer in, for test property 1 here of money going from the security deposit to the checking. Now, it could be vice versa if I had not used this whole system and I just got the security deposit deposited in my account and I said to myself, I need to keep track of this. I'm going to make an asset account, or I should say liability account for security deposits. And I transferred it in there. In that case, it would say from checking to security. But in any case, it's showing that for these security deposits, I have moved them around. Now it didn't show them all. If you notice that, I kind of picked up on that. And this is another caveat. See, I only see 4 transfers, but I got 6 security deposits. Why didn't it show them all? Because when it didn't automatically tag the security deposit for unit 2, and you're like, why not? Like, you automatically tag everything else. And that's kind of how the whole reporting system works. But for some reason, it didn't do it here. So, obviously, I'm a Quicken fan, and I use it and I love it for what it does, but it's not perfect. But I tell you what, I've used multiple accounting systems and there is no perfect system. They all have weird things that they do or bugs or just, systems that don't exactly make sense. And, because they're made by humans, and whatever humans sat down to set up this rental property thing definitely knew a lot about rental properties. I wouldn't doubt that, but they just did it in a way that made the most sense for them collectively, and it ultimately doesn't translate into making perfect sense for me. But it is pretty cool, and it does do a lot. And again, you can use part of it, depending. on what you have going on. You don't have to use all the features. Like I said, I use it just to I have my properties in here. It sets up the tags. I'll set up a tenant. I keep the lease. And this would all be sitting in here in mine gray, right? And that's okay. It doesn't affect anything else. It doesn't affect my other reporting. So there you go. Okay, what else can I show you? So I think I showed you here again. You can pull down lists of properties, lists of tenants over here. You can create rent receipts. This is another area where you can pull reports. You can do reports from here, from the rental property area. You can add transactions here as well. You can, which if you, you can add a transaction here, putting the property and everything, and it'll tag it, and obviously it kind of mimics, you entering rent. And this is what will certainly, if you go over here to enter rent and you put in all the info, it's gonna connect it, with the right property. I think for entering rent, that's a good way to go. I would do it actually using these buttons to be doubly sure. But when it comes to expenses, do you really want to come over here and go expense and enter all this information? Probably not. Probably what's going to happen is you're going to get expenses coming through to the checking account. You have your utilities, if you pay them, probably paying automatically or whatever. And a lot of transactions are just going to come through the download. So say you get a downloaded transaction for your utility bill. I'm just making this up, obviously. And in this setup, because again, the way we're working here is we are going to put all rents and all expenses in one set of categories of income and expense, and then subdivide by tag. I'm just going to categorize this into utilities, though it doesn't look like I have a utilities category. Let's see, rental, real estate expenses, all, yeah, for some reason I don't have utility set up. I'm just going to put it under other, but I'm going to put the tag for which property it is. It's unit 5, property 5, unit 2. And then, I don't know, you could put some notes if you wanted. Real estate by tag, there it is. That's my saved report. If you do that, it's going to show up here, other expense, 2332, but it's under the test property unit, unit 2. I think this reporting subdivided by tag is pretty good, actually. And it's a nice way to see all the activity in one report broken down by unit. So I admit that I like that. That's not how I do it, though. Not only do I not, if you're using the rental property area, it's designed to produce this report, okay? I do it differently, and I'm going to have to do a separate video on that, but I like to have all of my information delivered to me in one single report. I don't want to have to pull a separate report for my kind of personal life and then a separate report for my real estate and this, that, and the other. Because I've over the years tried to streamline this so it takes me the least amount of time. So I've devised a different way to track multiple bits of real estate so that it reports along with my other stuff. And I'll show you here an example, quick example of what I mean. Now, this is my kind of master report. I can see my business activity, investments income, personal income, taxes, personal expense, and then real estate activity. And right here, you could see the sum total of all this. But in my case, what I do is I make an income and expense for each individual property. And I have each property, list one after the other in this single report. So I don't actually do the same categories that display broken down by tag. I actually make duplicate sets of real estate income and expense categories for each property. And it's a little bit more work on the category front, but ultimately it means I can have everything in one report. So I'll do a video about that. And then the other way you could kind of slice and dice this is if you were like that person I mentioned who really wanted to have like an AR report for her rents due, and because she was dissatisfied with it, this was working. What she decided to do is, and she had been doing her real estate in QuickBooks anyway, so she was transferring out of QuickBooks to use something less expensive, also that could involve her personal finances. We used invoices as a way for her to send rent bills to people monthly, and also have an accounts receivable setup that would only show the amount of rents due. And I will make another video about that because that a little bit involves using the business side of home business and rental property for your real estate, which makes sense because in my opinion, real estate is a business, so you can kind of use invoices and you could use vendor payables. And in our case, they had a lot of units. So, it really was like almost like a function, more of a business versus just like one unit, Though I admittedly say often that each piece of real estate you have is like a little mini business. So that's why I always think of best side hustle real estate because you're essentially having a side hustle that is a business. Anyway, that's another topic. But okay, so that's a lot. Hopefully, I don't know if that made this all entirely clear or not, but I'm sure it's at least going to give you lots of little cues when you're messing around yourself to be like, oh, why is this? Why is that? Hopefully it will solve some of those mysteries more quickly for you. Going to stop there. Keep an eye out on the channel for these follow-up videos I just mentioned. I'll try to do those next so that, all these real estate videos kind of come in sequence on the channel. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Talk to you later.